Roads are racist and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. And we have with us today Delegate Matt Morgan of Maryland. Welcome, Matt.
Oh, always glad to be here, Mark.
So we love to have Matt here when we're talking about these incredibly important issues of roads, and that roads apparently have become racist in the United States of America. So podcast listeners, this actually came from Pete Buttigieg, who's the Secretary of Transportation of the United States. And apparently, like a lot of these articles that are coming out about how roads are racist, these articles are talking about, they're climate issues and the roads are causing climate change and they're being put through poor neighborhoods and so forth. Kind of interesting because my understanding, Matt, was that when you had like a brand new roadway go through your neighborhood, not where you actually live physically, like your subdivision, but through your community, maybe is a better way of putting it. Usually that increases prices for people who are lucky enough to have property on the road because now it's like rezoned commercial.
Yeah, I mean, there's good government spending and bad government spending. Good government spending allows you to have more freedoms, like roads, adequate police force. Bad government spending is spending that is frivolous and on stuff that people can provide for themselves. I think the major problem that we're having with the secretary is this is what happens when you get a mayor that, I think South Bend, Indiana is full of potholes. Like this guy couldn't fix it when he was a mayor. I don't know why we're trusting him to the entire nation, but this is what happens when you have a adult male that takes off for months at a time for maternity leave.
So, case in point, podcast listeners, in Climate Wire, which is in E&E News, they wrote this article. It says, Biden administration targets roads built under racist policies. As the country's sprawling interstate highway system took shape in the 1960s, its planners routed freeways directly and often intentionally through communities of color and low-income neighborhoods. Well, folks, they have a picture on this article, and it's a picture of a highway, and underneath the highway is like a homeless community, as if homelessness is caused by the highway. But that's of course, the inference here with the picture, naturally, because the Biden administration isn't responsible for more homelessness with inflation. Oh no, it's everybody else's fault. It's not his. And it says, while many fought to preserve their communities, local opposition was no match for government's power of eminent domain. Neighborhoods were split, residents displaced, and economies splintered. By the way, I'm not a fan of eminent domain either. But the idea that these roads were built purely for the purpose of being racist is just stupid. So then it says, but without the second prong of Biden's plan to remake the economy, the embattled Build Back Better Act, there is no guarantee that the communities still living in the shadow of these highways will be the ones to benefit from their removal. Neighborhood revitalization could lead to gentrification, for example, and price residents out of their homes. So they're saying roads are racist, but when we rebuild roads, that if we don't rebuild them the right way, they might gentrify the wrong communities, meaning, I guess, white communities, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, the roads are obviously racist. I mean, this is a ridiculous talking point. Even the New York Times came out and corrected them when he used it a couple months ago. But it's interesting, they've corrected this. I mean, it's obviously not true, but they keep going back to the well because, if you were against these roads, Mark, that makes you a racist. And that's the reason why they do the talking point. It's
and what are these roads?
Intimidate you into silence.
What are these roads that we're talking about? We're just talking about like improving the roads and fixing the roads and fixing the bridges, and maybe in some cases, building new roads.
Well, last week in Pennsylvania, a bridge collapsed. Do we celebrate that bridge collapsing because it's the end of a racist bridge?
I think there's actually a Babylon Bee thing on that one, actually. So Pete Buttigieg in the Daily Caller, Pete Buttigieg goes all in for speed cameras. So apparently this is one of the infrastructure bill's purpose, according to Pete Buttigieg. Listen to this, podcast listeners. I can't wait to hear what Matt has to say about this. Any American driver who might occasionally like to put the pedal to the metal on one of our nation's many roadways had better take notice of provisions in the infrastructure bill signed into law recently by Joe Biden. Particularly freedom-loving motorists had the best they better beware of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's, actually it's Pete Buttigieg's, I almost made a mistake there and called him something else, just unveiled master plan to pursue a target of 0 deaths on America's roadways. A key component of his plan is to blanket those roadways with speed cameras. Technology controlled by government, supposed to achieve a lofty, though unattainable goal. The plan is, of course, based on the false premise that the Constitution provides the authority for the federal government to embark on a massive spending and control spree to eradicate all driving-related deaths on roadways across the nation. But who is going to nitpick constitutional principles when it comes to saving lives? Certainly not Pete Buttigieg or apparently anyone else in the Biden administration. Here's the thing, folks. Pete Buttigieg wants to put the speed cameras not just in all highways, but in the communities of color. I don't think Black communities want speed cameras in their communities. I mean, look, for me personally, I hate these cameras. I think they're unconstitutional. If you need more policing because people are speeding.
Well, they don't want to hire more police.
That's
we just had that debate all last summer as their cities were on fire. The quote Ricky Bobby, I like to go fast. And this is just not going to allow this to happen. My question really is like,
that's what you told her first date too. Yeah. So,
well, she enjoyed it.
But Pete, he wants these speed cameras and he wants them inside of, basically on every single highway and in Black neighborhoods, in Hispanic neighborhoods, in white neighborhoods. And my problem with them is that, yes, there's usually a warning, but the warning is so small, number one. And number two, I would much rather be stopped because I think that has much more of an impact. So if I speed, right, if I happen to speed, let's say 10 miles over the speed limit in front of a school, which admittedly is not a good idea, right? That's the one place that you should be going slower, podcast listeners. I understand that. I would much rather be pulled over by a cop than I would by a stupid camera that takes a picture of it. And like 3 days later, it's like, we got you. And we're going to suspend your driver's license if you don't pay this by X date. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's just a revenue generator. That's all it is for them. They're kind of big brother. We have the technology. It's pretty easy. We don't really like or trust cops. That's their opinion. So we're going to, put out these speed cameras and kind of control everyone to show that we're doing a good job. My question is that the feds are putting this out. Who's the enforcement mechanism? The IRS? Did you get a speed ticket with the IRS now?
Yeah, it might be. And aren't cameras, by definition, things that, like the surveillance state, I have a problem with. I've always had a problem with the surveillance state, which is why I don't like speed cameras. But you and I both know the speed cameras, and this is what I think a lot of podcast listeners and many people out there don't know. Speed cameras really just aren't about measuring your speed. They're about literally reading your tag. Okay. They read your tag and they find out, oh, is this person, do they have an arrest warrant against them? And so forth. It's literally a surveillance system. It's not just about going, oh, you drove 10 miles over the speed limit. You owe us $50. It's much, much more than that because it is basically its own system of communications with a surveillance state. Oh, we know exactly where you are right now. We know that you were in this particular community. And then 2 hours later, you were here. Gee, I wonder what you were doing.
Well, I mean, at some point, they'll just sell out to their big tech overlords. And, think how beneficial it could be. You're driving down the road and Amazon's like, hey, wouldn't you like a, whatever, camping trip? We can stay at this hotel, you're right there, Yeah. I mean, it's just at some point it gets to be on America.
Not to mention, they're going to have AI applied to these cameras. So at some point you're going to get something on, your social media that says, hey, I know you like to speed in front of the school down the street. So you must also like speeding in front of this school too.
They already do stuff like that with the GPS. They'll suggest stuff to you on certain GPS apps.
That's creepy.
They'll be like, hey, there's a gas station nearby. There's a McDonald's nearby. Do you want that?
That shouldn't be allowed. Yeah. I mean, look, if you want to affirmatively search on your phone and maybe enable that portion of the the smartphone, then I get it for a period of time. But the fact that it's like enabled all the time, I know Apple's going to go, oh, well, you can disable that anytime. Does anybody out there in podcast land really believe that you can actually disable this without the surveillance state knowing where you are at any given time?
No,
and now they're going to have cameras too. It's like, well, your phone said that you were in front of the school speeding, but we also have this speed camera too. And you weren't even driving your car. You were driving your girlfriend's car.
Oh, you just drove into the limits of Washington, D.C. We need your vaccine card.
Yes. Excuse me, sir. I saw the speed camera showed that you crossed over into Washington, D.C. from Virginia, and you did not show your passport.
Yeah, they collect all this information right until the point where you go up to the voting booth. They're like, nope, can't. Picture ID? No, that's racist.
Yes,
can't do that.
There's supposed to be a special sticker on your car on the back, right by the tag, and that sticker basically enumerates that you've had your vaccines and your boosters, and the speed camera read that, and that's a $50 fine because you violated the vaccine passport
only if
code.
you're a Republican. It's also hooked to your voter ID.
But it goes back to the
point of, inclusion and diversity.
But the problem in these communities, of course, obviously is far greater than a roadway. And the Biden administration, the idea that they're trying to bring racism into the roadways is so stupid. And hopefully we're making fun of this in the right way to demonstrate that, but also the dangers, right?
Well, they won't get this because they have no sense of humor because they're internally unhappy people. That's just the way they are.
It's funny too. Matt says that. Matt brought this up to me the other day. He goes, you know what the problem with them is? Because Matt and I are both in the Maryland House of Delegates, okay? So
and there's a bunch of people that don't really like that.
They are already triggered that we're there. So we sit almost in the very back of the chamber, and the chamber has 141 members. It's a very bad idea to put us back there and we sit next to each other. So in front of us, there's this one delegate, and his name is Ben Barnes. Okay, I'm going to call him out. He's like the last white guy to be elected in Prince George's County. Yeah, okay.
The Great White Hope.
Which is really kind of funny, because he's played the race card his whole life as an elected official. And now he's the last white guy there, and he's not long for this world. And he's wondering, wow, man, this just doesn't seem right. I was always on, the side of the fact that, people were racist and so forth. And now I might be ousted myself. Anyway, Matt and I were joking in the back of the chamber. And this guy, this delegate, looks back at us, and he has a little smirk on his face, but at the same time, it seems kind of upset because we're having fun. And then I said, Matt, what's with these people? They don't know how to laugh. We're dealing with serious issues. We understand that. But you will lose your mind if you don't have humor, which is really important. Matt says, you know what the problem is? They don't have any humor at all.
No, it's absent. That's their Achilles heel. And podcast listeners out there, you get out there in these family dinners or big settings, you want to strike a political point, throw some humor in that because they have none. And believe me, their tolerance for joking around is zero.
Yes, it is. And we had a gerrymandered map, podcast listeners, this week in Maryland. And long story short, I put a bill in. The map basically violated a river so that you had part of the district on one side, part of the district on the other. It was the same district.
Canoe over.
And there was no bridge. So in the Maryland Constitution, it says you must.
It's a district of nowhere.
So I put an amendment on the bill, and the way the process works is you have to pass the amendment out in writing to the leadership of the other party, which would be the Democrat Party, for them to read it first, to give them a heads up of what you're about to propose on the House floor. And the amendment was called the Canoe Act of 2022 that would provide canoes to people on both sides of the river so that they would have a way of getting to each side, the other side of the district. Well, the leadership had a complete conniption. They were like, you can't do this. This is wrong. It's too early in the session to be this way. I'm like,
it's too early. It's too early in the session to make fun of us already. I mean, they only handle redistricting every decade.
Exactly. It's like, let me get this straight. You are totally hosing the Republican Party in Maryland with this gerrymandered map, and including in my own county where you split up a district with a river, even though it's against the Constitution.
And we offered a map that you didn't need a bridge.
That was fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you didn't have to cross the Wimmer. Nobody needed to swim. I mean, I guess they could put polling places on, You know, that'd be the next thing. They're going to require the Republicans to swim across the river to vote.
So the majority leader gets a copy of this amendment, right? The majority leader, which is a Democrat, naturally, because they are the majority in Maryland, he gets up, he reads it, and he starts pacing across the House floor like, oh my gosh, how am I going to defend this on the floor? Because all that I'm trying to do is to do two things. One, bring humor to a situation, and two, make fun of the Democrats for being so incredibly vicious and stupid of disenfranchising voters in my own county. And they're like, no, you can't talk about that. That's not allowed. You can't do that.
Only Republicans disenfranchise voters. Didn't you see what happened in Georgia?
Yes. Well, apparently roads are racist, but rivers are not racist, according to Democrats. You can have a river right between a district, and that's okay.
Well, that's an act of God, and they don't really well, we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we do have a good Dumbest Bill podcast, listeners. We got to hold on for that. So next up, we have Gensaki says crime started under Trump. So she just had her White House press conference. It was like an hour long. To her credit, it was a long press conference. So, hey, way to go, Jen. You know, you were up there. You were taking the heat for Biden because Biden obviously can only do a real press conference once a year. So she's up there and she's asked the question and, you know, about crime across the country because of all the cancel the police movement. It's really out of control. We've talked about this before in the podcast. We have that clip and here it is.
Going back to crime, I know you noted the president is, not for defunding the police. He has initiatives on combating crime, but we are seeing crime surge in major cities, and the president's poll numbers on the topic, there was he had an approval rating on crime was at 36% in one December poll. Does that indicate to the White House at all that Americans feel Democrats are out of touch when it comes to safety or criminal justice? And, what's the administration's takeaway to these numbers and the rise in crime?
I think we all agree or should agree that violent crime is a serious problem. We actually saw a record jump in murders in 2020 under the former president.
So she actually said that. We actually saw a record increase in murders in 2020 under the former president. That was called Antifa and BLM and all of the other, upset miscreants across the country who went onto the street and rioted, burned, pillaged, and killed. And that's what she's talking about. She's like, and so go ahead.
Well, I mean, they're all Democrats, though.
Oh, yeah, the rioters, of course.
Well, not the rioters, the people getting killed, the people doing the murdering. They're all Democrats because if there were white guys with MAGA hats on, you would have wall-to-wall news coverage of it. And so that's my proof. They're all Democrats. Look, this is a big problem. Across 16 different, I think, cities in the United States, we're at all-time murder highs. Our own Baltimore city, Maryland's largest city, because we're on the East Coast over here, I think there's been 34 murders this month already. And it's been extremely cold. I mean, normally that does play a role in it. I can't believe when the weather cracks. I mean, this is really
the nation's capital just had a couple of murders last night. Nation's capital.
Well, have you seen the carjackings there in DC?
It's unbelievable.
I mean, like these kids are getting carjacked. I mean, they're like 13, 14 years old. Yes. They're obviously being paid by the different gangs there.
Where's mom and dad? Where's mom and dad? Hold the parents accountable. Oh no, it's racism. That's causing them to go carjack.
But it gets back to the overall policies that they've been pushing in for the last 10 years, but taking fathers out of the households. It goes back to cashless bond.
Letting people
woke prosecutors.
Sure.
And it's all, you're seeing the results of their policies.
So here's the other part of this clip with Jen Psaki at the White House press conference with the White House press corps. And if you notice, podcast listeners, there's no mention of arresting the people who actually commit the crimes. So again, think about this comment again. The people who actually commit the crimes, what would happen if you actually arrested them and incarcerated them? Well, think about that when you listen to this clip. Here it is.
And there hasn't been new FBI nationwide data that has been released to date. There has been some city data, of course, which is important to focus on and talk about. Our view is that instead of turning this into a political football, we need to be focused from the beginning of the president's time, all of his time in office on reducing crime and keeping our community safe. And that's why he's been a long-time advocate for more accountable community policing. That's why he has supported and advocated for additional funding for proven community programs to reduce crime, why he's working to crack down on rogue gun dealers who sell firearms to criminals, and why he's taken executive action to crack down on ghost guns.
Did you hear her say anything about cracking down on the criminals committing the crimes? That's the one thing she didn't say. It was everything but that.
They don't believe that because they believe that's society's fault.
Of course.
Yeah. Blame society.
Exactly. And meanwhile, where the heck is Joe Biden? I mean, he literally cannot take on his party on this issue because they've lost their minds about the idea of canceling the police. They really, truly believe this.
Well, I mean, look, if he really wanted to solve this problem, he might want to go back and read that 1994 crime bill that he voted for. I mean, look, getting tough on crime, that's just not in the political cards in that party right now. They want to come out and blame society because ultimately I think they like the chaos.
I think so too.
And I think people are starting to see through it.
Yeah. And what kind of political party likes chaos? Typically by chaos, I mean constant lack of predictability on the streets, constant lack of predictability.
Stalin was a big fan of that.
When you buy things, yes. And you got inflation, whether even not the product is going to be on the shelves, constant unpredictability as it relates to buying gasoline for your vehicle or paying your energy bills for your house. And that's exactly right. It's the Marxists that do this. Marxists do this because it's a way of fomenting revolution, but in their favor when they say, well, you know what the problem is? The problem is capitalism. That's the problem.
Well, that's their solution for everything, though. I mean, if it's climate change, well, give us more power.
Oh, always.
It's the virus. Give us more power. It's George Floyd in systemic racism. Give us more power. It doesn't make a difference what the problem is. And normally the problem is caused by their own policies.
Exactly.
It's the same solution over and over again. Turn us over more power. They believe that you'd be so much more happy, because they're not happy people, right? We went over that. They would be so much more happy if our country was just simply a little bit more like the USSR.
Yeah, the former USSR or the CCP, or probably the one that they would love the most is Cuba, because in Cuba,
because of the weather,
there's well, that's climate change, but because with Cuba there's 100% control of the government of everything, and Cuba it's so transparent as to the fact that the government truly controls everything, and the fact that people aren't driving new cars, they're still driving the American cars that were left there prior to the revolution. They still don't. There's nothing else.
You're sitting there, 57 Chevys driving around.
All history stopped. Right at the revolution when Castro took over.
Socialism.
So I think what Biden was doing, he put Jen Psaki out there, podcast listeners, because I think he was in his Oval Office having accidents in the Babylon Bee. Here is the headline. White House cat already tired of being blamed for all these accidents on Oval Office carpet. Oval Office carpet. So the picture of the cat right in the foreground, and in the background is the Oval Office and this big pile of human crap on the floor. So I know that's vile, but it is funny. First Lady Jill Biden has announced that the White House has welcomed a new pet, a cat named Willow. Initial reports indicate that things are not going quite as planned from Willow's perspective, as she is blamed for all the messes on the Oval Office carpet. What on earth is that foul odor in here? Said Chief of Staff Ronald Klain, walking into the Oval Office. It smells absolutely horrific. We'll see. That's just our new cat Willow, said Biden, nervously trying to cover up the considerably large stain for a young kitten. We've been trying to potty train her, but she just keeps having accidents. What can you do, huh? This article continues. It's incredibly funny. Podcast listeners, one of the reasons I read this is because apparently the Babylon Bee is in danger of losing their social media status on Facebook, because the Facebook fact checkers, who are 15 years old, are so triggered by this satire that they keep putting correction labels on it saying, fact check, this is actually not a true story. And it's like,
well, it's kind of true. I mean, we had that accident over there in the Vatican. back in his
Well, yeah, that is a true story.
I mean, so maybe that's one of the, you're running out of conspiracy theories because all the conspiracy theories are coming true.
I think, but the fact that Facebook, can you imagine being a fact checker going, that's not a true story. Oh my God, and it's not funny either. I'm gonna put a warning label on it, and I'm gonna say to them, they have 2 more chances left. If they don't stop, we're gonna ban them from Facebook.
We're gonna shadow ban you. We're gonna cut your views back. You know what? It wouldn't be a problem. But so much of the stuff they're fact checking has been proven to be like legitimate. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where Facebook cut back on the New York Post about the laptop for, well, not Joe Biden, but for his son there.
Sure.
So Hunter, these things have a tendency of coming true.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the fact that Facebook is still engaging in this kind of censorship at this late stage in the game, and the fact that they obviously, you said it earlier, Matt, progressives don't have a sense of humor. They don't know how to laugh.
Especially for satire.
Especially for satire. Exactly. Because satire and humor is by definition, it's really funny. And the Babylon Bee does a stupendous job on this. So good job. So next up, podcast listeners, Whoopi Goldberg really steps in it. In the New York Post, she says, I stand corrected. Whoopi Goldberg apologizes for Holocaust comments. Whoopi Goldberg apologized for saying that the Holocaust was not about race, only to seemingly double down on her controversial take while trying to justify her remarks on late night TV. The View, I can't believe anyone watches that, co-host initially attempted to quell the outrage over her remarks late Monday by posting a tweet that offered her sincerest apologies. On today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. I should have said it is about both, Goldberg wrote. As Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League shared, the Holocaust was about the Nazi systemic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race. So we have a clip on this before we talk about it, podcast listeners, and in her own words, okay, here's Whoopi Goldberg. Here's the clip.
Let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
Ethnicity.
It's,
Well,
no,
consider
it's
Jews
about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
It's not about race. It's about man's inhumanity to man. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg, perhaps the dumbest person on TV on The View, although, what is her name? Behar? Joan Behar? Joy Behar. Yeah, there's no joy in that life, I'm sure. Her husband has no joy for sure, being married to her. But she's probably arguably dumber. I actually thought Joy Behar was Jewish herself. So, but I don't really know if she is or isn't. But one would think that someone who's an adult would have stepped in right there at The View and go, oh, wait a minute, that's really not true. We might not want to go there. But who knows? Maybe that they actually want people to talk about The View, and this is what they say.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Ronald Reagan quote. It says, well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. So, I mean, that's what I thought of when I heard this. I'm like, I can't believe that they're saying this. But where are the fact checkers for The View? Like, why isn't it getting banned or censored? Like, hey, stupid comment that's not accurate.
That's a great point, Matt. I mean, if there ever were a reason for Facebook, not for me, okay, because I believe in free speech, including Whoopi Goldberg's right to say stupid stuff.
Look, Mark, yeah, when you believe in free speech, sometimes you say stuff that might not be accurate, might be wrong, because you're getting information that's coming in. It's not misinformation. It's maybe you're just wrong. But look, that's the point of having multiple viewpoints and multiple sources of information. What she clearly said was wrong.
Oh, for sure.
And where is the outrage at?
Exactly. And you're right. In a normal functioning democracy with big tech, if big tech is going to censor Babylon Bee, you would think that they would censor, of course, Whoopi Goldberg, because Whoopi Goldberg is the one that got up there and said this incredibly stupid thing that obviously wasn't true. But I want to repeat what I said before, which is I don't want social media to censor anyone, because as stupid and as awful as it is that Whoopi said what she did, to me, in a functioning democracy, you need dumb people to say dumb things to remind people about the awful things that happened in history so that you will never forget, and so that you will always remember, and so that you can remind people what had happened. And that's one of the cleansing parts of the stupidity that she did. It's reminding people about history and how things can go very badly. And that's why I think censorship, among other reasons, is a terrible idea.
Well, the people that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Amen to that.
And you do have to recall certain things accurately. This is the reason why history needs to be part of our curriculum in our schools, and people need to learn accurate history. But look, the fact checkers out there, they're not really in it to be legitimate or in it for, it used to be a deal where big tech and Twitter and Facebook, you're like, you know what, these are your way to connect communities, and we're going to get our voices out and heard. And now it's just, they're just pushing a narrative.
And she allegedly apologized, to be fair to Whoopi, but she waited until late night television to apologize.
She waited till the outrage was so great that she had to get out in front of it.
And her apology was BS. It was she still has no understanding about what she said and how awful it is, and she still has no understanding of history, because her apology was, well, maybe I just said it a different way. It's like, no, what you said was incredibly inaccurate and wrong, right?
I mean, that's their excuse for everything. Oh, you didn't hear me correctly. It's like, no, we heard you.
Exactly. We heard what you said, and it was really stupid, and it was wrong.
But see, it's infuriating, especially people like us, because if we got out there on a public camera and said something that grossly stupid, I mean, you'd be taken out to the woodshed for it.
For sure. So next up, podcast listeners, are we going to have a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump rematch in 2024? Are we going to have a rematch? So get this. So hear me out. So you have Joe Biden, who's talking about hiring, or appointing, I should say, the first Black woman. And I guess technically the term is nominating, because the Senate has to approve of the nomination to the Supreme Court. So Joe Biden wants to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court. And that would be the first Black woman to be on the Supreme Court if that were to happen. And so there is all this chatter that Black woman could be Kamala Harris. And if it's Kamala Harris, then that means, by definition, Joe Biden gets to appoint a new vice president. What if that new vice president were Hillary Clinton? So it's my understanding that when he appoints someone, that's who it's going to be. That's going to be his vice presidential.
I agree. Hillary would do a better job than him right now.
She probably would. But what if he goes through with Kamala on the Supreme Court, Hillary gets appointed vice president, and then at some point, miraculously, at the beginning of 2023, he either dies because Hillary Clinton's now vice president and the Clintons kill everybody, of course, as we all know. Or
I was going to say, no sleep with one eye open.
Or he just somehow gets Alzheimer's so badly that everybody's like, you've got to go. And of course, Hillary, is going to gin all that up. She's going to say, he's really bad. He doesn't know how to think. He doesn't have his faculties. We need to replace him. And of course, by definition, she then becomes president. And then you've got a Hillary in the White House versus Trump again. This could happen, podcast listeners. I mean, this is being set up in front of us. Could it happen, Matt?
I guess it could happen. I mean, it's probably likely. I hate to say that. But yeah, I mean, Hillary, I'm a little speechless just thinking about this and how this would play out.
Here's something funny, by the way. The Babylon Bee had another really funny article, which I'm not going to read, but it had Joe Biden in a paint store looking at all these paint swatches, and it says, Joe Biden looking at paint swatches to determine the color of the next Supreme Court nominee.
Well, I mean, when that's your only criteria,
Oh,
I mean,
exactly.
you know.
And Kamala, of course, it's quite clear to me that there's not a lot upstairs with Kamala. You know,
Well, I mean, she's uniquely qualified.
she's never been challenged, obviously, in California.
to be a Democratic Supreme Court justice.
Yes, California is one party state. When you run, you really aren't answerable to anyone on the right whatsoever when you're running because you know you're going to win. And that's been her whole life story. And now she's vice president. And then she becomes, let's say, a Supreme Court justice because she gets nominated by Biden. The Senate confirms it because they're just like, please, we don't want her to be president. And then Hillary comes in.
Appoint her to a position where she can do immensely amount of damage for the rest of her life.
Oh, for sure.
You know? The thing on Hillary running again, as conservatives, got to be really like, you got to go the extra mile and make sure Democrats are held accountable for the results of their policy. This isn't a Joe Biden or Kamala Harris problem or a Hillary Clinton problem. This is an ideology problem that their party has gone to
But
to get these results.
You brought up a great point, though, because Hillary, when this happens, okay, I think this is probably going to happen, podcast listeners. I really do. When this happens, Hillary, as then president of the United States in 2024, when she's running, says, you know, I had nothing to do with putting those policies into place. I'm the new person on the block, and I'm going to make sure this is corrected. In fact, I've been riding the ship since I got here. And so I had nothing to do with it. Don't hold me accountable for what happened.
That's exactly what they'll say. And the big tech overlords will be carrying her water. The media will be carrying her water. And, I just hope the American people are just not, smart enough not to fall for it.
And by the way, podcast listeners, Trump has $122 million in his war chest right now. So if he weighs a 2024 bid, he already has $122 million in the bank. I mean, dwarfing any other Republican candidate who's thinking of running. And this is without, I think, the Trump organization, all of his supporters and all that, even going out there and being covered by the media, let alone social media, right? He can't even advertise on social media for donations. So imagine when he's finally able to do that, how much money he's going to wait to raise. So clearly, my point in saying this is clearly this guy's running, Trump's running. Clearly, Hillary, who now went to Ohio and is helping Tim Ryan become the next U.S. senator because Ron Johnson is retiring. So she's now involved.
Yeah, she went to Ohio. She went to Wisconsin. I mean, 5 years too late. She's
darn it, if only she had gone to Wisconsin.
These evil Russians hacked into her Google calendar and deleted all of her appointments to go to Wisconsin. So that's the reason why she couldn't make it out there.
Oh, you also know, too, if she's president of the United States, she's totally going to be invading, Russia, of course. She's going to be
start up the war machine.
Oh, absolutely. Because, but actually, I take that back. Maybe she won't because the Russians will go, hey, you know what, Hillary? We actually know a lot about the dossier. We're going to have a tell-all news conference, so you better stay out of this. So I take that back. She's probably going to do nothing. She's probably going to invite Putin, to just go in there and take over.
Yeah, but probably. But the news conference wouldn't mean anything anyway because it would be covered by George Stephanopoulos. And it was just, more Democratic operatives out there. And, Hillary, she can put on a good front. Her acting skills are right up there with Alec Baldwin and
but who's more
the people like that.
Who's more sincere? Yeah, you're right about that. Who's more sincere? Well, she might pull an Alec Baldwin with Biden. Actually, she might pull an Alec Baldwin with Biden.
I was wondering you're going to catch that.
Don't worry, Joe. It's a blank. Don't worry. So anyway, I actually think this is going to happen. And my curiosity, Matt, is what will the Republican Party, what will conservatives say when this happens? What will they say? What can they say?
Look, the legitimate thought is, look, we go back to ideology. And the wokeness has taken over that political party to the nth degree And look, wokeism.
But what will Republicans say when Hillary becomes Veep and they just see it coming that she's going to be president?
Well, knowing the Republicans that we have running things like Mitch McConnell, they'll probably encourage it and maybe even vote for her.
Yeah,
at this point.
Turtleneck probably does.
Yeah, I mean, between McConnell and Lindsey Graham out there, I mean, it might we welcome them in open arms and give them a hug. But look, I think I'm a big fan of making Democrats.
I think Lindsey would rather hug Biden, quite frankly.
Yeah, maybe Hunter. Look, I'm a big fan of making Democrats accountable for their policy, the results of their policies. And you keep getting the same results over and over again. It's like if you eat candy every single day, eventually you're going to gain some weight. The problem is with Republicans, we like sell broccoli. They sell candy. Now, we know broccoli's better for you, but, it's a much harder sell.
Oh, absolutely.
And I really, that's where we're at right now.
But you know what? And I know this happened years ago, of course, and it's sad that we don't have Rush Limbaugh around anymore because he really was, he really knew how to tell stories. He was a good storyteller, but he used to always have this comment. It's like, don't doubt me. And I swear that really is true here. Don't doubt us here on Mark of the Millennials. She is going to be president of the United States, not from being elected, but from being appointed. Okay? She's going to be appointed, and they're going to have a complete rematch again. And Trump's going to do the whole thing in the debate. It's like, well, Hillary, you should be in jail. That's what you should be. Remember when he said like, I never heard a presidential candidate say that before. So anyway, that is the deal with Hillary seeks the Veep appointment. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is canceling God. Yes, you heard that. Canceling God. Delegate Terry Hill of Maryland put in a bill to cancel God. House Bill 81, put in by Delegate Terry Hill. Terry being a lady. She represents a portion of Columbia, Maryland, I believe, and she wants to cancel God. Here's what the bill says. Declaration of Rights, which is part of Maryland's Constitution, podcast listeners, religious freedom, religious tests, and oaths and affirmations, altering and removing references to God from certain provisions relating to religious freedom, religious tests, and oaths and affirmations, and providing that the amendment to the Maryland Constitution proposed in this bill be submitted to the voters of Maryland so that we can get rid of God. I mean, because obviously it's not just good enough for her to get rid of God. She wants the voters to say, oh no, God's bad. Let's cancel God because Terry, you're just like God. Unbelievable that we have this person doing that. Matt, you know this delegate. Talk to me.
I do. She's a friend of mine. She's actually on my committee. And it's but it's interesting.
Are you a co-sponsor? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was just getting ready to say, I wish that we weren't under COVID protocols, where you just have the bill sponsor, because I would love to see everyone that piled onto this bill. I would have loved to see how many Democrats jumped on and wanted to, cancel culture of God.
In other words, so we have COVID protocols, and what you're saying is, therefore, she couldn't
you couldn't get a bunch of co-sponsors. Yeah.
But if we didn't have those in place, which of course we shouldn't, because we're not operating constitutionally, then she could have gone out there and gotten like maybe 50 or 75 co-sponsors, and we would have really seen what the Democrat Party actually stands for.
And that's what I'm disappointed about, because I like some truth in advertising.
Unbelievable. So get this. Article 37 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights, which is part of our Constitution, it's the preamble. It says in this bill, it sets forth that no religious test may be required as a qualification for any office of profit or trust in the state other than a declaration of belief in the existence of God. That's already in our Constitution, in the Maryland Declaration of Rights. By the way, it's a beautifully written document, very historic document. It predates the United States Constitution, an incredibly important document historically and also for the state with religious freedom and religious tolerance. And this individual wants to get rid of God because, quite frankly, she thinks, in my opinion, that she is God. Case in point, when she was in a bill hearing, where you are sitting down as a delegate and you're listening to bills, she was actually on Zoom watching the hearing and then operating because she's a surgeon at the same time.
She was multitasking.
She was multitasking. So she was literally operating on somebody, and you could see like the bloody towels and then her like suturing somebody up or something like that. And it's just unbelievable.
She was later fined for that.
She was later fined for it, podcast listeners. Sure. So in the New York Post,
she said that the patient gave her,
she said the patient gave her written approval.
Written approval to operate on her while she's under a Zoom call.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's right. Hey, look, so
you think driving while you're on your cell phone's bad?
So, Dr. Hill, while you're fixing my hernia, I don't mind if people see my schmeckle while you're on the bill hearing. I mean, it's not a big deal, okay? It's all right. So, in the New York Post, lawmaker surgeon fined for attending Zoom meeting from operating room. Maryland Democrat, this is an actual article, and this really happened. A Maryland Democrat state lawmaker is under fire for logging on to political meetings on Zoom from a hospital operating room where she works as a plastic surgeon.
I'm sure her malpractice insurance was excited to see this story.
Yeah, with blood-stained towels occasionally in full view. So she was fined $15,000. In any normal world, by the way, she would have been expelled from the General Assembly. Because this just tells you how over the top Democrats are. Oh my gosh, I can't miss the bill because it's the bill of all bills. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. We need less bills, which is why we do the dumbest bill in America. We don't need more bills. We need less bills. And this bill, of course, is dumb because she wants to cancel God, which is really disgusting and scary because she thinks she is God. We actually have a clip from her, okay, from Delegate Hill. This clip was from just last year, just a few months ago. And it was about social, environmental, and criminal justice. Listen to her virtue signaling. Here it is.
As you said, I'm a physician, and I really look at policy through a healthcare lens. When I think about social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, and criminal justice, I think that they are, linked in ways that cannot be separated. And that when I look at policy solutions to the problems that we're dealing with, it is clear that everything comes back to what is in the best interest of our health as a society.
What's in the best interest of our health as a society? What about your patient? What about the best health of your patient while you're on the Zoom call,
I always thought justice was supposed to be blind. If you have social justice, I always thought we were supposed to judge people as individuals.
Well, yeah, it's social justice. It's environmental justice. It's road justice.
It's Marxism.
Highway justice. And by the way, criminal justice.
It's Marxism.
The reason we played that clip for you podcast listeners, it's not just the irony of her talking about, medical stuff because she's a doctor and she did what she did and got caught, but also because she really doesn't believe in God. It's obvious. Okay. No delegate, no politician would put a bill in that says they want to cancel God and to get rid of it and to get it out of the lexicon and get it out of the Constitution. And because what she believes in is government. Government is her God. Government is the God of Democrats. And one of the reasons we do the dumbest bill in America is because we know that government is the God of Democrats. By the way, it's the God of some Republicans too. A lot of Republicans like big government and they vote for it year after year. But Democrats, of course, they take it to the nth degree. Government is their God. They want to replace God and they want you to bow to government, not bow to God. Go, Matt.
That's absolutely true. And that's why, if you say, well, we're deleting God, less people jump on that bill than if you're replacing God with government. So that's why I'm really, really curious to see how many people really support this, because I think this is the prevailing wisdom of the Democratic Party right now. And you saw this when, it does follow a form of Marxism.
Sure it does.
Stalin removed God from Russia. And, when you put government up on a pedestal where it can be the end all be all for everything and be worshiped, that's pretty scary.
And that's the last word for Mark and the Millennials, and that's the dumbest bill in America, canceling God. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Thank you to Matt Morgan for joining us. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, Getter, and our website. See you next time.